We're going to go ahead and proceed with today's Insight class, and that is on the topic of unlocking self-service analytics with the Stratum Analyst Hub. My name is Karen Farley, and I do documentation and testing and also assist with product design at Sylvan. So today's agenda, as I mentioned, is looking at features of the Stratum Analyst Hub. Three major topics we'll be looking at: data copy, which you can use to jumpstart budgets and plans; data import to add measure data from various sources; and master data import. So all of these are different ways to bring data into measures or other objects in your environment to work with that data along with other corporate data that you have. I'm going to cover features, the highlights of those features. I'll give some demos and look at requirements, and then open things up for questions and point out where you can look at more resources on these topics. So first of all, we are focusing on pieces of the Analyst Hub, which are part of the overall Stratum Data Hub. So this quadrant down in the lower left corner is where these features that I'll talk about today reside. Again, they're part of the overall Stratum Data Hub. These are focused features for your citizen data scientists or your data stewards, your administrators, not necessarily for your whole population, because we're dealing with bringing in data and possibly manipulating that data with our planning features. So you can copy or import data for sales plans, budgets, forecast, bring in supplemental data. And the great thing about this data that you're bringing in or copying from one place to another is that through the feature functionality of Stratum and its data hub, all of that becomes analytics ready for you. So you can analyze, compare, collaborate, or plan with this copied or added data. I'm going to start by looking at Stratum Data Copy. And so this is a feature where you can copy data directly from one corporate measure to another. That lets you populate measures that are lacking data or replace existing data. A key use of this might be you want to copy a prior year's sales data to use as a starting point or jumping off point for a budget or forecast. And the nice thing about data copy, when you are setting it up, there are features in it where you can apply a factor on the data that you're copying over, such as multiply or divide, so you can increase that set of data as a whole before you bring it into the target measure that you're copying into. You can also focus on a certain time period, such as just copy data from one quarter to another quarter, or focus on a smaller segment of your data, such as data for a certain product class, a certain region. So that helps you control how much data you're bringing over to work with from one measure to another. Some things to know about Stratum data copy requirements. Once you do a data copy, and I'll show you how to do that, you will get some data completed emails to notify you that it's completed. The functionality is focused on being used by view and security administrators, and they have a data copy authority rights. So there's only certain measures they can copy into. It does require a Windows SQL Server implementation with applicable licensing. And this is the case for data import and master data import too, by the way. So that's a Stratum Analyst Hub license. In the case of Stratum Data Copy, there's also something called Stratum Service, which gets installed with your environment. So there's going to be some one-time setup steps for categories, making sure they're corporate categories, measures to make sure they're data copy enabled, user profiles having data copy authority, and so on. And I won't show the topics today, but whoever is setting up that data copy functionality for you, there are topics in Stratum Viewer Help, which go over what those requirements are and the step-by-step setup checklist that you can look at to make sure you've covered all the steps and things are actually set up the way they need to be for people to use this functionality. I am going to go into a Stratum data copy demo, but first I'll introduce you to Stratum Data Import, and then I'll do a demo of data copy and data import together before moving on to master data import. So with Stratum Data Import, you are importing user-curated measure data from a local or cloud source. So this is an external source, not copying from an existing measure. It's an external source of data into your Stratum Data Hub. This works with measures that are called enhanced categories. So you could bring in a full budget or other plans into your environment. You can add market trend data, special event data, weather, vendor, other outside data that you think complements your core enterprise data. Sources that you can pull data into for using data import or pull data from are Excel, CSV, or text files. There's also some additional licensing and configuration that we have available. It's called Stratum Cloud Import, and a designation called data stewards for certain security administrators. And that can extend what you can pull data from, what you can import data from. And that gives you options to pull data from local SQL Server tables or even cloud options like these Azure Blob Containers, file share, etc. So we'll see a menu when I do the demo of data import that you'll have options to use local file, that's Excel, CSV, text. Other options you may not see depending on what your environment is set up to use. So I have more options here because I've set up the full width bandwidth of options that you can import from, and I'm a data steward. If you're not a data steward, for example, you might not see this menu. You might just kick off initiate an import, and you'll be prompted to pick an Excel, CSV, or text file. Something else to know about Stratum Data Import: when you are doing your imports, there are mapping windows, some smart mapping that help guide you through picking what you're copying from and to, and where to put that data as you're importing it. We also have a feature called templates. So data import templates can be used to potentially automate future mappings of the same type of data. And you give those templates a standard name, description, save other mapping choices from one of your imports that you're actively doing, and saving that information for future import use. That can come in handy with something called the Stratum Cloud API, which I'll talk about briefly here, but you can use those templates. For example, if you're a data steward, to kick off certain types of imports for SQL Server, Azure sources. But backing up here a minute, Stratum Data Import is designated to be used by view and security administrators, and you can give security administrators a data steward status. So that gives those security administrators who are data stewards greater access to more features and import source file types. So they can import from SQL Server tables, Azure sources, if your environment is set up to do that. And they have access to something called the Stratum Cloud API. So that gives them an alternate option for bringing in some data from different types of sources versus just using the Stratum interface. So if they use this Stratum Cloud API, they could use that to import from local SQL Server tables or Azure sources, or alternatively just use the viewer interface for that. I'm not going to be walking through an example of this API, but there is a section in viewer help that talks about that type of way of kicking off data imports. Additionally, what's nice about some of the features in Stratum Data Import, you can restrict some measures so that only data stewards can import data into those measures, not the entire population of view and security administrators. So that's a nice security feature. I'm going to go ahead and hop over into a browser here to do the demo of data copy and data import, and I'll come back and give you a few more points of information about Stratum Data Import. And when I do this, just be aware, you may see the screen flash on and off here a minute and go blank until I get the browser sharing activated. So just bear with me for a second. But what I'm looking at here is the planning scenarios forecast view. And what this does is give me a place where I can copy some data. My view has a year 2025 in it. Please pretend that you're just looking at a future year like 2027. So in this view, I want to copy data from a prior year's actual sales into a units adjustment column for a forecast. I have a baseline forecast, but I want to bring in some other data and then maybe make some changes to it without altering my baseline forecast. Then as the year 2027 proceeds, actual sales data will come in, and I can even add some calculations here to compare what my baseline was to actual, what my adjusted forecast was to actual. These are planning enabled columns, so I could use the up and down arrow to adjust things. I could type directly into a cell to adjust a number, or I can even look at a subtotal. And I could type in a subtotal. Let's adjust that up. And when I type into the subtotal, my changes ripple up to all the other, in this case, product families from region 330. So I'm not going to process this, but if you were making these types of planning changes after you copied in some data to work with, then you would process those planning changes. So I want to bring in some data for April, May, and June for this units adjustment column using the data copy feature. So to do that, go into my analyst tools and data copy. You can see some of the other data copies that I've done. Just to let you know, these can take, this one that I'm going to show you a sample of takes 4 or 5 minutes. So I'll try and remember at the end of my demo to come back and show you the results. But I won't wait 4 or 5 minutes before it's complete. So I've got a data copy, let's say forecast, 25 adjustments, Q1, April, June. I'm going to leave the email as blank. Just going to do this as my test. There's a data mapping tab, and here's where you pick where you're copying data from, where you're copying it to. I want to work from actual sales and forecast. And then I pick the actual measures. These are the categories. So I'm going to pick actual sales units, forecast units, adjustment 1. I'm going to increase this data by a factor of 1.05 before I copy it in. Now, the time mapping is where I pick what period of time to copy from and to. I could go by current year, last year, 2 years ago, or pick a particular year. Again, I'm picking 2024, 2024, and I want to look at April through June, I think is what I said in my demo. I'm copying that to some forecasting data, so I'm gonna pick the same things here, or sorry, 2025. And remember, we're pretending this is 2027 I'm copying into, but I'm picking 2025, April through June. Additionally, I'm just going to do this data copy for one of my regions that are in that view instead of both of those regions. That gives me a more controlled data copy. So in the filters tab, I'm picking a level that I want to filter by. I click this icon and I can select 330. Do OK. And now my data copy is set up. So all I need to do is process that, submit it for processing, and you'll be asked to confirm. Let me actually go back to the list window and do that. So that was, this one is not processed yet. Select it and submit it for processing. Yes, I want to process. So again, this will take 4 or 5 minutes in this case to process. Yours could take longer or shorter depending on how much data you're copying. Once that data copy is completed, then I can go back into my planning view, and I'll try and remember to come back to this view at the end of my demos for other topics today, so you can see the populated columns and how then, since they're planning enabled, you could make some adjustments based on your knowledge of what's happening during those months in the future. So that's a data copy example. Let's dive into data import. Again, let's pretend these are future years, not current and past ones. My data doesn't have a 2027 or 28 year, but these concepts will still apply whatever you're importing, whatever years you're importing for. Here's a previous set of data that I imported. These 2 columns here, my user budget 1 and 2. I'm bringing in some data from other folks who are working on budgets. They have some opinions of what my budget might be. So I could bring that data in as I have here, look at that data for my working budget compared to my frozen budget, which I'm not wanting to touch, but I might want to make some adjustments here. And then if I see some numbers that maybe my working budget is off a bit here, I'm going to move that up or down based on what input I've gotten for some current conditions in the marketplace or in my company. And again, here you could either type it in directly, as I've done that, or you can use the arrow keys to bounce the numbers up or down as you need to. This is a planning enabled column, and then I would process those changes back. So now I want to, let's pretend this is 2027, but we're working with 2025. I want to bring in a couple columns of data using data import, again, so I can kind of compare what my working budget is to what some other folks are thinking about. So to do that, I go into my analyst tools again, Stratum Data Import. And I'm going to pick new. I have more things set up in my environment, and I'm a data steward, so I see all these options. You might have a different type of setup. You might not be a data steward, in which case you may only just click the new button and see a window pop open to pick an Excel, CSV, or text file. I have something where I could pick from a database. I'm not going to do that today. I'm just going to pick from an Excel file. So I have an Excel file that I've set up. I'll come back to the types of Excel files that you can work with, but this is an Excel file where my transactional dates are down in this first column, and across the rest of the columns I have where I'm copying that data into, the measures that I'm going to be importing from. Actually, in this case, these are my two columns of new data that I want to bring into my environment. So let's open that, and you'll get taken to a mapping window. There is some smart mapping that can happen here, which has happened in my case. So if you hadn't done any type of importing of this nature from this type of data, you would see columns that would say ignore and ignore. And so you would pick your measure that you're copying, importing the data into, importing the data into. You would pick measure and then pick which measure that you're importing into, which is, in this case, it's smart mapped already to where I want it to go. Same for these other columns in the mapping window. If I hadn't had smart mapping from a previous import, this might show as ignore. So I'd have to pick date, because this is my column of data information, the dates of the data, and the format of that date. And it already did that for me. Let's just give this a description. What I can do, I won't do that today, but I'll just open this up. I've got an active import that I'm setting up. I could create a template off of this data import to reuse in the future if I have similar type of data, or and kind of another way to shortcut as I'm picking a file from import, then I can pick a template to use, and that would do the mapping, because it saves the mapping choices that I've just set up for this other import. You give it a name, a description. It can be global or personal. You can delete the category data before your import. And there's something called schema drift, which I won't get into in detail, but if the import file that you're using has a different column set up, it helps the data import to kind of overlook those different imports. For example, if there's like 3 columns of measure data, but my template was set up with 2 columns of measure data, allowing schema drifts kind of helps the data import template move through those changes of what it expected to see. So I won't do the data import template, but it's there. If I save this and I imported similar type of data again, I'd be presented with a data import template option where I could just pick, yep, use that template, all its mapping stuff, go ahead with the import. So I've got my imported data, the transactional dates, where I'm going to be importing the data into, and gave it a description. So now I'm going to go ahead and process that. Do I want to continue? Yes. This process should happen a little bit quicker than the data copy did. This is what's happening here. This is my in-process data copy. And let's see if I've got some other ones that are completed. I have a couple from a couple days prior where I did some imports as well, and it completed okay. So here we go. Budget user adjustment, it completed okay. If I had my email open, I'd be getting an email telling me your data import's done. Now we can use that data. Let's go back to my forecast view so we can see that data. Okay, so here it is. I had copied in or imported my budget 1, budget 2, some user input on what they thought the budget would look like. And based on that, again, maybe my number's way too high. My frozen budget is here 1.7 million. My working is 1.5. I've got under 1 million from my folks who are giving me some input on that. So I might want to crank this down a bit. Let's just say 1.1. And then I could process those changes back, which I won't actively do here, but I could process those back, and then those would be captured and saved as part of my working budget. Wrapped up my Stratum data import example. A couple more things to know about Stratum data import. As I mentioned, there are some transactional dates that are part of your import files. I do have a help topic flagged here that you can browse through. There's something also called a time series type of import file, where the date would be in some header rows above the measure item columns. In this case, I use the transaction type, and that is nice because, again, your transactional dates are all down this first column in your import file, and transactional styles are compatible with more types of import features and more source file types compared to the time series type. I believe, for example, it's only the transactional style that I showed today that is compatible with data import templates. So just a heads up about that. You'll also find, I've mentioned, I think you'll get data import completed email notifications that you can configure so that you're not sitting there staring at that window. Is it done? Is it done? Wait for that email. It'll tell you it's done, and then you can go ahead and look at your data and work with it. There's also some other online help topics that I flagged here. If you're working with Excel file for your imports or CSV and text files, some other tips about how to prepare your data so it works smoothly with your data imports. For the sake of time, I won't pull them up here, but they're flagged here for you to look back at later after this session. Another piece of information, as I said earlier, all things that we're looking at today, they require Windows SQL Server implementation with applicable licensing. In this case, a Stratum Analyst Hub license, I believe data import, if you want some of those advanced features of different file types beyond the Excel, CSV, and text, there's a Stratum Cloud Import licensing that comes or that is required as well. And like data copy, there's some one-time setup steps specifying things like an upload file location or location for your uploaded imported files, specifying cloud import locations if you're using that type of functionality, setting your security administrators, if any, to a data steward, and setting your categories where you're copying or importing data into as enhanced categories. And I kind of breeze through those pretty quickly, but for whoever is setting up data import for use, there's a checklist topic in online help for what your requirements are and what those setup tasks are and where. So it's a really nice condensed checklist. Do this, this, and this, and then your designated administrators can be using data import. So moving through here quickly, I'm now going to talk about the last topic in our presentation today, which is Stratum Master Data Import. So this is a little bit different in that it's a companion piece to functionality called user-controlled attribute features. And my demo will make this a little more clear, so but I'll at least go through these bullets and then the demo should help solidify what I'm talking about. But you could have a level, let's say customer parent, that, or in this case product class. You want to add an attribute. Sorry, let me back up here. You have an example level of product. You want to add an attribute of product ABC class, and then you can import data into that product ABC class attribute using master data import. With master data import, there is an option which is really nice. You can create levels of data summarization from your new attributes. So I could have product ABC class as an attribute of product, but then also set it up so I can use that as a level of summarization to drill through or to analyze data by in my views. And you will be importing data in terms of master data import only from Excel spreadsheets. That's your sole source of the type of data that you can, or the type of file that you can import from. With Stratum Master Data Import, I've just parked a few screens here, but you'll be setting up a user-controlled attribute. Processing, you need to make sure that processing, a full process has been done in connector before you can then import your master data import to populate that new attribute that you've set up. And like Stratum Data Import, Master Data Import has some mapping windows and smart mapping to help guide you through your imports. You will get import completed email notifications. This functionality is also for like the other pieces of features, functions that we talked about today. It's just for view and security administrators. Requires that SQL Server implementation with that applicable licensing of Analyst Hub license. And there are some one-time setup steps for this functionality as well. And that includes some email notices that you can set up saying, hey, someone added an attribute and now you need to process your connector database to make sure people can then take the next step of importing your data. So there are some key setup steps, one-time things. Again, I've parked a couple help topics here where there's a checklist of what are the requirements for master data import. And then whoever is setting it up for your company, what are the checklist steps and where are those done to make it happen so people can use this feature, the user-controlled attributes and the master data import. I'm going to, one more time, hop over into my browser. So one more time, look at my browser window. I have an environment where I'm using the customer parent level. It already has quite a few attribute relationships. Let me take a second for this to populate here. So all types of additional information that I can learn about customer parent or added to my views. But there's one, let's just say shipping status types. I want to know, is this express shipping? What's the status type? Is that on back order? I don't have that piece of information yet about customer parent. So I can add that information using user-controlled attribute and then import data for it using master data import. Let's go into that first user-controlled attribute window. I've already added that new one because, as I said before, when you add a new user-controlled attribute, then it's going to be pending status. In this case, it's pending an update. That means it hasn't been processed. The connector database hasn't had a full process yet. So things have been processed to allow you to then import data into that new attribute. So I added this a couple days ago and already processed my connector database. So now there's no pending updates. I can proceed and import data into it. But first, let's just look at what that window looks like. You would be clicking New. I'm clicking Edit because I previously set that up. So customer parent, I picked the dimension. I gave a name for what attribute I wanted to set up. Yes, I want to create a hierarchy from this because maybe I want to use this in a view in the future as a level of summarization or analysis. And that's going to be called customer parent shipping type. I've also set up one a long time ago called market product class. And in the example, I'm going to show you how it's used as a level of summarization in a view. So this one was set up from product, gave it this name. Yes, I want it to be a level of summarization. I gave the name to that. And I previously had imported data in that long ago, but I will show you what it looks like when I'm importing data for this new customer parent shipping type. Again, if you're going in fresh, you would be clicking new. Once you saved your changes, then when you came back to this list, your pending updates would be yes. So you'd have to wait until a full process of your database was done in connector before you could proceed to the next step. So again, we're looking at customer parent. Now I can go into my master data import window, click new, and I had prepared a file here of customer parent shipping information. All my customer parents are listed here. My column of data that I'm bringing in to populate that master or that attribute is in that Excel file as well. Let's just say, and I don't have it set up here, but if you had another customer parent that was going to be in your system in the future, let's say 5005, you could add a row for 5005 here, leave that information blank, and then you would be able to bring that new key value or dimension into your environment and populate it in the future. I haven't set that up that way, but there are some examples and help that talk more about this process of what a new key value is and what messaging you might see as you're importing your data to prompt you to, are you aware there's a new key value? Do you want to proceed in adding it? So I will open that file. Again, I'm just taking to a mapping window and some smart mapping has been done for me already. My viewer knows I'm looking at a dimension, I'm looking at an attribute. If it didn't know that, this would be ignore, this would be set to ignore, and I would manually go in and pick attribute. This is my attribute information, and then I'd pick where I'm copying that data into or importing it into, which is shipping type. If this had been set to ignore, I'd pick dimension and then pick my customer parent dimension because that's where shipping status belongs, or the customer parent shipping type information belongs. I'm going to go ahead and process this. I think this should be a fairly quick process as well, but I wouldn't have to necessarily sit at this screen and wait for that. I could watch for my email tell me when it's completed. Let's just go into the view because I'm assuming it's probably there by the time I add that attribute to my view. So I need to first make that new attribute active in my view. So I'm hovering over an existing attribute of long description, add attribute relationships. And here's that new one that I had added. Add that to my view so it's visible. And now that information that I had imported is showing up in the column for that new attribute. So that's really convenient for you to see that additional information. I mentioned before I did create a level of summarization for this customer parent attribute, but I'm going to look at product marketing class. So remember I pointed out I created market product class attribute for the level of product. I also enabled the hierarchy level option to create a hierarchy level. So this is that hierarchy level that I had created from that new attribute. Like any other levels in your views, you can drag and drop. So here it is. Here's all the information populated for it in the past. I can drill down or up. So now I'm drilled down from market product class to customer parent. And again, I can see that new attribute for customer parent with all the information that I just imported via master data import. Let me just do a quick backup and see if that initial view with planning data, if that import completed, and if we can see that, or if that data copy completed, and if we can see that data. Yep, it did. So remember at the start of our session, the first demo was data copy. I copied data from past actual sales into some units adjustments information or columns. So this measure now is workable. It's planning enabled. I've got my data that came in for April, May, and June. And I can either type in changes or use the up-down arrows. Mine is not, there we go. Or I could type in a change at a subtotal for this forecast, and my changes would ripple through for the rest of the product families, and then I could process that. So we've looked at data copy samples, data import samples, and finally the user-controlled attributes and master data import samples. Last time, switching back to my PowerPoint, and then I just wanted to point out there is some contact information you can use if you think of questions or need some clarification. We covered a lot of topics today. There will be a recording posted of this class, so you can watch it again. That will come up on Sylvan's YouTube channel. We also have a customer net knowledge base accessible from the Sylvan website. There's a customer login option. And there's product online help, as well as how-to and other short videos that we produce for our customers.